You are watching the Huddle. Ninja here with Chris Walder and John Henson. And from the bad news side of things, Wemby is done for the season. Blood clot issue with him. So he's on the shelf for the rest of the season. Coach Pop not coming back. So I have two questions about the current state of the San Antonio Spurs team. And Chris, I'll start with you. 26 games left, I believe it is. They're 1-3, both straight up and against the spread since the Wemby news. Are we just blindly fading San Antonio for the rest of the regular season in those 26 games?
I think it's honestly too early to tell if that's going to be the case, just because when you lose a player as substantial to what San Antonio does on both ends of the floor, like Victor Wembenyama, it's going to take some time to adjust. Unless we forget, ahead of the trade deadline, they made that move for De'Aaron Fox, and you anticipated Wembenyama and Fox being your dynamic duo for the rest of the season. Perhaps you make a push for the play-in tournament and maybe even the playoffs at that point. But it's unfortunate what happened to him. Deep vein thrombosis in your shoulder sounds horrible. It wasn't that long ago that we saw Chris Bosh's career come cut short because of a blood clot issue as well. So hopefully Wembenyama can come back at 100%. The player I'm kind of looking at specifically with this new look Spurs, at least over the final few months, is Stephen Castle, because he right now is the favorite to win Rookie of the Year across most of the sports books that you'll find online. But at the same time, over the last 4 games without Wembenyama, his numbers have been terrible. He's shooting below 29% from the field, 11% from three-point range. It goes to show how awful this 2024 draft class is, because he's still at minus money to win the hardware at the end of the season. No one is necessarily challenging him at this point, but I need to see that efficiency improve. I expected him to take on a grandeur role, him and Chris Paul, be under the learning tree of Chris Paul. But so far with Wembenyama, that 7'4" safety net that he used to have no longer in the equation, it's been a rough going for Castle. But I think this is kind of just a blessing in disguise. I think San Antonio probably needed to start tanking anyway. I don't think getting into the play-in tournament this season, which I don't anticipate happening, really does much for them moving forward. I think trying to get into that lottery, securing more ping pong balls, that's the strategy that behooves them.
And speaking of that, and speaking of Castle, minus 135 at FanDuel for Rookie of the Year when I checked earlier. But speaking of ping pong balls, John Henson, do we really need to start considering the fact that this San Antonio Spurs team could find themselves in the Cooper Flagg race? They are plus 900 at FanDuel to draft Flagg. They've got their own pick. They've got the Hawks pick. This could be a real thing, John.
Yeah. Even if they, they'll be able to potentially trade up or maybe make some moves, package a player or two. But this is giving shades of the history repeats itself with David Robinson going down with the foot injury and the Spurs losing. Losing there and getting the number 1 pick. So, I mean, as many ping pong balls as you can if you're the Spurs. And if you get Flagg, I mean, it's time, right? Because the Castle struggle is just strictly because the gravitational pull of a player like Wemby, your 5-man can't help. He can't get off. He can't leave him on the 3. On the pick and roll, you have to be concerned about him, because I don't care what kind of backside help you have, unless you have John Henson as your 3 guard on the backside. There's nothing you can do. So it's just shows how good he is and what he does for that team. And that I don't think they're gonna be very good down the stretch. And I don't know what the ultimatum will be for the Spurs organization, but I'm pretty sure if you look at the minutes on a chart, I bet you all their guys' minutes go down slowly and kind of level out. So, hey, rich get richer if you're the Spurs, if you get Flagg. If not, you're still going to get a pretty good player that should help you in the future. So I'm sure they're happy about that.
Yeah, I just want to add too, players like Wembenyama, we always call him the unicorn because he's like a once in a generation talent. But lest we forget that players of his size, especially someone who moves the way that he does, they don't necessarily have long careers. Just because if you look at like players who are above 7 feet, like a Yao Ming, for example, they go through knee injuries, they go through ankle injuries. It's just natural causes because of their size and the amount of pressure on them. Wembenyama might be a little bit different just because, again, he is playing on the perimeter. He's rushing to the basket. He's not your traditional low post threat, although he could still do that. So if you were to get a player like Cooper Flagg or even land a top 3 pick in this draft, that's like the ideal insurance for the San Antonio Spurs franchise. I hope I'm dead wrong about Wemby and the guy plays into his late 30s and he's a multiple-time MVP and the Spurs can win the championship. But you kind of have to think big picture, especially with this arising with the deep vein thrombosis this early in his career.